welcome Kelly to Accelerate podcast, where we discuss topics on how do we help the customers, the companies, and individuals to achieve more outcomes and faster, and also share learnings and tips, as well as some mistakes we may potentially make along the way so that we can all get better. So, Kelly, why don't we get started with you introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Kelly Ellis. So I have for the last 15 years been doing product management and most recently product operations in big company where it's large and complex, and how we have evolved our product practices. What I'm really most interested in is how do companies turn their strategies into results, how to help teams do their best work, and then most recently, understanding the impact of AI and how it's changing the industry, the product manager role, and what still needs to remain and even get sharper so that we can realize success going forward.
That is so cool, Kelly. I know you've worked at a larger organization complexities and also have seen evolution over time. So, what are some of the things that are on your mind right now, given there are lots of uncertainties, there are also lots of excitement, both at the same time. So, would love to hear what's on your mind now. What are the people you talk to? What they talk about? What's on their mind right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is there's no shortage of articles, podcasts, announcements coming out about the evolution of particularly the product manager role. I've
Right.
heard things like, well, they're a builder, or do you still need a product manager? And I think all of it is saying we still need some function to be able to have really good judgment and decision making. And whether that's at the build phase and part of the product itself, but it's also part of the organization and the leaders who are part of it. And no amount of I believe, will replace what should we be going after. Obviously, there's things that can help augment making decisions, but placing bets, using judgment, using critical thinking will not go away. And I think some of what's happening right now, particularly in organizations, is somewhat performative, meaning, well, I've got to show or demonstrate that I'm building something. And yes, you still need to build to learn. But if you're just prototyping, but with no real intent or to drive any kind of outcome, then I would question, what are we really doing? And is it again just performative rather than trying to drive results? So that's what's been on my mind, is understanding the landscape is changing and what skill sets can you improve and hone? And then what are some things that maybe you can give up on and that should be automated, and where can AI help with that?
Right. It's a very interesting time about product management for sure. And, even to extend it further about that is
Yeah,
about product operations. But let's park the product operation for a second. Let's talk about product management for
sure.
sure. I think you built up a term about builders, and, we had multiple guests here on our podcast talking about the builders, talk about a product manager. Should product managers survive coding and a more embedded, should product manager build products? Or should product managers more going outside to be, since like, designers can build product, engineers can build product, and product manager maybe should be even better embedded in customers and understand, or maybe more embedded in strategy and more embedded in the commercial side of things. So how do you see it in the product managers, sort of multiple hats, which hats they potentially do less and which has become a bigger?
Yeah. Okay, that's a really good question. And I guess I would, with my short answer, say it depends. Because I think what hasn't changed is we've always had, hopefully a UX designer, an engineer, a product manager. And we've always realized that, in absence of any one of those, you have to wear multiple hats. There are some PMs where maybe they're in a very back end heavy, tech heavy function. They probably already had a lot of that skill set. If you're someone that is more front user facing, you're spending a lot of time with the front end customers, you were already kind of leaning that way. So when it comes to prototyping or building, I would say prototyping is good. Who does it? I think then that can be up to either who has the time, the skills, the aptitude. And if it means that we want everybody to kind of learn it, well, then learn it together. But if there's already somebody on the team who's already rising to the occasion or doing it, I don't think it has to be the PM's role per se. But that's no different, like I mentioned, than you have to lean in and maybe play some of the roles across and help support each other the way that we did before. I think that if in the event, someone says, well, you don't need a PM anymore, someone has to step up and still say, okay, what is the strategy, the vision? What is it that we want to go after? What are the outcomes that we want to achieve? And making sure that we're keeping that top of mind. I helped run a product fellowship at my former company, and oftentimes we would, and this was trying to build an internal cohort, we would have engineers come in and be trained on product management. And
Right.
it was awesome because they were so used to solutions and they were excited to get in on the problem definition side. Or we had a lot of analysts come in, those who are really good about doing research and doing analysis. And then it would be teaching them those product management skills. So I think that product management draws from a lot of different backgrounds. Now it's about, okay, those skill sets are needed. And AI is definitely something that everybody, no matter what your job is, you should start to become familiar with and use. But I don't necessarily think that a PM has to now just exclusively become a builder. I think it really is up to that kind of cohort to figure out where is it that they want to do that work and then who best to do it at that time.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially there's a lot of talk about the roles collapsing,
Yep.
that there are different roles coming. I mean, that is not new, right?
Right.
I say that is because, think about the platform, think about like a quote unquote tech roadmap. Tech roadmap has a whole lot of things like very rarely would have like a traditional PM managed tech roadmap. Could be
Right.
run by architect, could be run by engineering lead and so forth. But building and maintaining a tech roadmap that would both support the tech and also the platforms and applications on top of it is product management, right?
Right.
What to build, what to prioritize, and where's the challenge. So I think that to that extent that what I, like you said, is that product management come from different roles and at different
Mhm.
times can be played by different kind of quote unquote functional role, but the product manager head can be
Yeah.
a different one,
Yeah.
right?
Are
Uh,
you seeing a change at your company, how you're treating a product manager?
So we actually have two types of product role. One is we are like a customer external facing that some
Mhm.
companies call it outbound product manager, some companies call it, you know, product solution manager. So we call it product solution manager. They're
Okay.
doing the we don't want to say the last mile, more of the code to hand, like it's from the code is not the end, right? The code is just the beginning. When you code done, you still have to do enablement, go to market and all that. And that would also eventually to even customer onboarding and adoption. How does that work?
Hmm.
That's one part. And then there's another part where it's like a more technical product managers and actually more like our like engineering team does a
Okay.
lot of those. Even for user experience, we have a UIEs who are actually like a hybrid between design and so yeah, so that's us, but we're relatively small compared to larger organizations
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
the roles are more specialized. But even that, we've seen that the morphing of the goals where we definitely seen companies, especially some of the company more like engineering focused, they have a
Right.
much like their engineers are a lot more like a product
Hmm.
engineers, right? How's
Yeah.
it been in your experience? Did you see evolution and change over the years?
Yeah, I think what we first started off, so way back when we were doing waterfall, where you would get the funding and you would be scoped and inevitably you would be behind, you descope, and when you delivered something, the business had moved on and they didn't need it anymore. And then we moved into product management, but for us at the time it was Scrum. So how do you keep your backlog full and a lot of the mechanics around it? And we were called product owners. And then we moved into product management. And that's really where it was saying, oh, wait, it isn't just about backlog. It's about stakeholder engagement and discovery and working with your customers and driving outcomes. And that was really where we started to get smart about, okay, this is what product management truly is. And now it's about, okay, you've modernized your own stack or your own platform. How are you now going to connect with other teams across? And so we have been on a journey, at least what I've experienced, where you're looking at your taxonomy. You're looking at, we've never really split, at least in the experience I have, a product into like a back end technical versus a front end customer facing. But I understand, you can get a lot of different flavors with that. But for us, it was about you need to have these skills. And it isn't just about working with engineering, but it's about so much more. And a lot of it is that influence upward and outward and adoption and change management. The thing that excites me though, as you were talking about customer success and how you're kind of slicing some of those roles. I've been reading up recently and I'm interested to hear more about how people are doing this, where it isn't just vibe coding, but it's around how do you give people the ability to potentially contribute to code. And I can't remember the person, but they were talking about their customer success team and that they are now able to take some low-hanging fruit or things that they're hearing real time from their customers and be able to go make some tweaks. And maybe there's some parameters you could put around that, but think about the time that could then free up for then the product managers, the engineers to be more forward deployed on either, new customer segments or improving the products, with larger feature sets that could drive revenue. So I think with the right parameters around this and depending on how much people can contribute, I've been reading up about spec-driven development as well, which is super interesting, that maybe that democratizes who can contribute and participate. And maybe there's a little bit more surface area of what can then be covered from a product standpoint, as long as it doesn't become too cluttered, but that everybody kind of understands how they can participate in it.
Right. You kind of mentioned something very interesting. And I think that's probably both a good segue before going to product ops, and
Yeah.
also want to double click a little bit on um, the democratizing, like sort of the when it comes with the power, it comes with responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that definitely is I've seen companies and the teams struggle with that is, now anyone can code. Anyone can get agent, like the ones you said example, right? To say, okay, so you could have a customer have a challenge that can just go directly all the way, kick off your whatever coding tools, Claude
Mhm.
Code or Codex, whatnot, and then just do a commit and then be done, right? That's all good. It's fast and customer to value.
Right.
Um, in some of the teams, smaller teams, Greenfield, it's okay. But then in some other times, we also know you make a very small change, you can take the entire site down.
Right.
Right? I mean, what was it? When recently there was a company that they just made a very small change, CSS change to take a major outage on things because it's kind of hard to tell
Yeah.
what are dependencies. So how do you see
Yeah.
that the organizations dealing with or managing the ever more powerful capabilities come along with the technologies, the AI and others, and then
Yeah.
also how the other enabling things around it to make sure you have, let's say, a source of truth. Let's say you have a way to know what's going on, and others. What are some of the sort of the evolution of the technology and the capabilities, and what are some of the changes related to it that organization bring in, and some of the things work well and some of the things we start figuring out.
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak just from the experience of an enterprise and working in an enterprise, but also as I've been learning and studying up on what the trends are. I think vibe coding and at least just being able to prototype is beneficial no matter what. It is especially beneficial if you're just, like you said, greenfield and you're starting from scratch and you want to get something out there. It can also be great for PMs who maybe don't have a UXer, or it's a way to kind of get that feedback early. You can show someone visually, they kind of, it's like a shortcut or a shorthand for otherwise what could feel like a really laborious either documentation or discovery. So I think there's a time and place where it could be super beneficial. What I'm understanding, and to your point on, you could take down a site or you could have a major outage. I think in which to make possible this democratization, you do have to have some involvement, and probably source of truth isn't something that's just out in a SharePoint or potentially, and fill in the blank on your solution. But that may mean more familiarity with GitHub, or it could be that the templates, that engineering set up that have the non-functional requirements or have the kind of base, here's what it has to be, here's what it can't be, rules of engagement, basically, that if a team says, hey, I'm allowing you to go in and make some of these changes, here's where you go to do it. And there's already kind of some preloaded things where you're keeping them in their lane because otherwise I do think, like you said, great power comes great responsibility, but also some pretty big consequences. But if you create a playground or a working arrangement in terms of how these team members can come in from a technical standpoint, it feels like that could be not revolutionary, but definitely something that's more productive, and can be employed faster than maybe the traditional ways that we used to do things.
Right. It's very very interesting in a way where in the, we've gone through the waterfall to agile now to AI and agentic. It feels like some of the best practices in the waterfall era that makes sense, and the cost of doing that is become a really low. That makes sense. So we talk about spec-driven development.
Yeah.
And that's, for a while people say we don't need to write spec, we just write stories,
Yeah.
right? And because the story is where you break BRD into spec and the story is a part of it. Now, if you really think about AI, is that, the whole story is questionable now, given agent going to plan their own work. So if you write a spec, which by the way, 20 years ago, that's all we do. PMs actually write,
Right.
right? And then you go to the engineer, have them the code according spec. It's something where you can write spec and have agent to code, or at least around similar to that idea, right? So it's and the other part of that, it really is around documentation and templates.
Yeah.
Again, used to be something, it's like a heavy-handed, it's a lot of overhead, people have filled it out. But they exist for a reason, because you can operate within the frameworks of somewhere
Right.
controllable. Now with the agent, right, you do want them to operate within the, standard, within a structure. The prompts need to be very specific on what you can do, what you cannot do, so that they can like, what are some of the things you think that,
Yeah.
back in the days that could be too overhead, too driven. Now
Yeah.
things make more sense because of that, and that also in the realms of product ops, right? Even it, like you said, like as the technology and the people and how we operate evolve, not like everything happening in the past no longer relevant, right? We could
Yeah.
in a different format. So how do you see that?
Yeah, I think two different points there you made that were really good. So to your point, that hygiene, having good, hygiene is one thing. So having experience in geo-distributed models, we were already having to document. There was already some type of overhead, meaning, the best would, you hear all the best practices of co-location. Well, that's very rare, it seems like anymore, where you can either be closest to your user or have your engineering or UX team right on site with you. So there's always going to be some type of async or communication that's going to be needed. That is always best if you can easily document what you've been working on, potentially on the US hours, picking that up, let's say in the India hours, and having somebody be able to run with that with very little kind of overlap time. Now, so point is you needed to have good hygiene and documentation, or at least some type of async working relationship to make that possible. I think now with AI, what could make that easier, obviously, is recapping your meetings, or videoing or prototyping, or being able to annotate, and making all of that overhead really lessen, and being able to speed up just the knowledge. Now, it still means that people have to understand and contextualize all of it. In the future, if agents are doing some of that work, again, you have to still give it that context. I would say where we've also made things easier on that hygiene is we were coming up with cookbooks or tips, and now it's just really embedded into, PRDs, any of your GPTs, on what makes a good OKR, or how do I write this story. And so what used to feel like either wasn't good hygiene, people didn't know what was expected of them, or maybe they just didn't have the time or the skill, now some of that can get cleaned up. You can give, kind of half thought ideas and potentially some context, but then AI can really help fill in the blanks for you. And if that means then that's a more educated input into those specs, or for your engineering team, or for whomever that agent is, if that's the work that's getting done, I feel like that's also then helping with bringing some of that overhead down. But a lot of what you needed to have done before, getting context and doing the discovery, you still have to do. It's just a matter of how you're then sharing it with whomever is going to use it next.
Right. This is really very, very relevant to today, right? The reason when these sort of the process, the procedures, templates, and data hygienes in the past was such a chore, nobody
Yeah.
liked it. Everyone hated it, right? So it's like a
Yeah.
pulling teeth of that. Even though everyone knows these are useful, these are important. Now with the AI, all these things can be done, right? All the overhead become a no longer quote unquote, it's a very minimum overhead. And then
Right.
the value, right? The ROI all of a sudden turn used to be say, okay, I have ROI, I have the benefit of doing that, but the cost of doing that is so painful, take a lot of time. The
Right.
ROI is upside down now with agent and AI. If you define this,
If
then
you
it
define
makes
it.
sense, right? You can
Right.
take meeting notes, automate it, and send it to your source of truth, and then it's already there. So when you don't need to find it, it's there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I want to use that opportunity coming back to two topics. One is around product ops in a new era, and the second one is talking about one thing I always wanted to find out, which is the lack of understanding and focusing on product portfolio. But we'll put that on the side for a minute.
Okay.
The first part you talk about is the product operations. So you most recently, your recent roles in product ops that
Yes.
wasn't existing in a lot of companies, right? It's a relatively newer compared to product management. So what are some of the reasons that will come into play? And how do you see the current, we will call it agentic operating model, would
Mhm.
change or to evolve for that role?
For that role. For product operations, at least how it became relevant in my organization and when I was working across a really large enterprise was because, as I mentioned, we moved from product owners into product managers. At one point, we had Scrum Masters. We got rid of Scrum Masters. And we frankly weren't doing any, at least in the area I was in, product analytics. And so we were finding as we did surveys, we met with all of our product managers, their leaders, and said, where are you struggling the most? And they felt like they weren't spending enough time on discovery. They were spending too much time in focusing on delivery, and they weren't having any time really allocated to follow up on some of those product analytics. So born was the idea that if we had product operations that could be a force multiplier for that team, that we would focus on three things. It would be the portfolio health, and in the strategic alignment, and then how do we help with best practices? The portfolio health, I'll touch on quickly. That was the product analytics. And that is where we actually, and I know every organization does it slightly different, and depending on the scope of a PM role, sometimes PMs, if they have a small scope, can really hone in on those analytics. But we ended up having some product analysts and working with engineers to tag stories to be able to then look at patterns and fill back in on the discovery side of what we're seeing to synthesize the customer feedback. To finish out on that AI conversation, I think a lot of that hopefully can be either improved or automated with the use of AI. The strategic alignment, I would say, is a really big one. And because we're empowering these product managers and we want them to really focus on discovery and figuring out what the right problem is, what we were finding is that they were also being inundated with a lot of different priorities coming at them from a lot of different teams. And what we weren't doing is saying, okay, at the highest level, what are the enterprise priorities? How are we laddering to those? Meaning, have we actually put the people in the right places because this is where the emphasis is for the team? And are we also then looking at where we might have multiple priorities hitting the same team? And how do we have real trade-off discussions so that those teams can go and then figure out the best solutions and to deliver the outcomes? They're not having to play referee. So product operations can be leveraged as a tool to be this objective force that can pull all of the right people together. We would plot what is the value versus the effort, and we would have those conversations so that we could get those leaders from the highest levels to make choices. And I know that's always what every team is hopeful for, is that we can make choices, we have more focus, we have less things to work on so we can do them well. And product operations can help with that. The other piece then is looking at, as I mentioned, portfolio management, looking at where do we have our team members currently, whether it's product, UX, engineering, where is it that maybe we need to we look at the life cycle and we look at, is it more important to put extra against this product, or is it better to put more emphasis on these things that the enterprise is saying is what's most important? So really helping our leaders understand where our teams are and that we can then make those shifts accordingly. And then the biggest thing I would say was best practices. So as we have evolved our product model and teams were kind of doing everything slightly different, we wanted to make sure we kept as much flexibility as possible, but where we really needed to have consistency is where product ops can lean in and help out. And that's where we did things like product playbooks, where we met with designers and engineering leaders and product leaders and said, okay, how do we free up more time in discovery? And UX and engineering, they want to be involved in discovery. And so, what does that then mean for delivering? How do we maybe shift some roles and responsibilities there, doing some team health checks? And then doing things like, okay, what makes a good OKR? What makes a good story? And really just getting some of the hygiene and the mechanics ironed out so that, again, when we want to go in and look at data and roll things up and see how we're doing, that everyone is doing some of it somewhat consistently so that we have that ability to coordinate and look across the enterprise. Otherwise, we're never going to do the next big initiative or the next big thing. But we would help with some coaching and enablement of those teams so that if they were struggling and they needed help, they could kind of overcome that with some additional support. So we really saw product operations as a huge advocate and force multiplier for the teams. And anywhere we can augment AI with playbook or some type of, coaching tool, then implementing that I think is best. But there's still some rules of engagement that you want to see how your organization operates, and product ops can bring that to life.
Right. That's a pretty big role. Cover a lot of ground. Now, what it kind of lead to the second part of it
Sure.
is I think, I've seen talking, also working with a lot of folks coming out of the product ops community, it's very interesting where there's typically a very heavy focus on analytics and discovery often. And then there are some of them focusing on, for example, quarterly planning or cross-team resource trade-offs on that as well. And then obviously the best practice. We also noticed that like a lot of the ops roles, sometimes the value and the success are harder to measure, especially in today's agentic world. So what I think it would be a good segue to come into that is how do you either see firsthand or based on the, where you see it's going, that the product ops, not necessarily the individual, right? The things you have to do in product ops, especially in the agentic organization, is it evolving? How do you see it evolving?
Yeah. And I think you were touching a little bit too just on the value and how do we see like what value is product ops delivering. I would just say on that for a second, one of the biggest things, at least in my organization, was we wanted to make sure that there was no question that people knew what we were working on or what our priorities were or what we were going after. And so the way that we would measure that, whether it's what was our all hands or if it's a newsletter or the Slack channel, a lot of which the content we would take from the release notes and automate wherever possible, is looking at the views and sending out surveys. And do you know what your priorities are? Or what the team's priorities are? Do you see yourself and your team in that work? And so really ensuring that we are cascading down. And then how do we get feedback back up? Where is there clarity that's needed in the strategy? Do we have trade-off discussions that are needed? We started looking at say versus do, and how are we seeing the health of these teams? Is there places and hotspots that we want to go in? Or where's there a win where the team used something that the product analytics served up and they actually then made a different product choice as a result of it? So we would always look for those wins whenever we could to highlight and then drive the future work that we wanted to go after. So your second part of that would be, how do I see AI either improving that or advancing it? I think again, this is all as good as your data. If your data is not good, it won't help. But to the extent that whatever tool you use and wherever you're, basically putting in your information, you're going to want to have some type of documentation for, does this story ladder to an initiative, or does this initiative ladder to an enterprise priority? And if, as long as you've got those things tagged, go do your work, but let product ops then pull that together. And you, through the use of AI, how do we pull that into views that could then be served up to say, are we on track? Is there a barrier that needs removed? Is there a trade-off or sequencing discussion that needs to be had? But if the data is there, then we can be able to summarize that and not hopefully have team members having to input things into multiple places just because there's a different altitude or a different decision or leader that wants to see a new view. So that was manually what we do in product ops before, where we would say, don't just, you do it over here and then we'll kind of put that into the other places. Now, with the right tagging and documentation and context, you can be able to automate some of that easier. And then it's more about the focus on the conversation than just validating, did we actually input it into the right place or the right grid?
That is awesome. You just spoke, you just covered the part I was going to cover as well, which is the when it comes to product portfolio management, that wasn't a tool. A lot of companies don't realize that how critical that is. 40% of questions actually within the entire company are related to product and product portfolio. And these questions are not like you said, the value of products, people know what's going on. They know
Yeah,
what's the priority. So when you have a good products, especially you have a good source of truth, now with the agents, anyone can ask the source of truth versus source of like a messiness.
right,
I think that really is that the if anything, the agentic operating model requires a more than ever the source of truth. And to your point, product ops still play a very key role here is to say, how do I make sure the data is accurate? You know, AI can code anything, AI can do anything. You still need someone to review it, right?
right.
You still need to make sure that things evolve is still there. So I think that is a good partnership between people who know the best practice, who know what the good is like, plus a system that you know, regardless of human, an agent can access to, and the agent can do a lot of work, but you still need a sort of the human partners to collaborate to make sure that
Right.
and everything is up to date. This is
Yeah.
awesome. I am a very, it's a great insight, very, very helpful, and very timely right now because so many companies are going through the journey and then they're like, okay, maybe now with AI, we don't need things, right? AI just go find it, but it's just so expensive and
Yeah.
so unreliable, right? And even if we say, okay, we can just go to Jira, but Jira is not, it doesn't have a semantics, right? To give your enterprise or product portfolio an operating model sort of things. So I know you're
Right.
ahead. Do you want to add any more to it?
Yeah, I was just going to say two additional things. There is some hygiene, some working agreements that are needed. And so it isn't a silver bullet to just say AI, go do it. And the other thing would be that we shouldn't try to automate just what's existing today. You know, if we just take that and to your point, every team does do things slightly differently. And what we wouldn't want to do is actually force everyone to do things the same or to automate a workflow that's broken. So I think there will be a nuanced approach that I feel like product ops or those who are kind of taking and zooming out a step back is to say, where is it maybe that something is broken or isn't working as best or what we would, you know, approve or want to do? And then how do we approach that and say, how do we want to do things differently? And then where is it that we can leave flexibility or autonomy wherever possible? And where is it that the minimum amount of kind of compliance or consistency is needed? Because again, I think depending on the life stage of a product, whether you're an incubate versus somebody who's trying to scale, whether you're a tech platform backend heavy versus infrastructure versus that front end, there are different dynamics and attributes of these products that will need to operate slightly differently at different times. So how do we come at it with a fit approach for this is what makes sense at this time, and then how do we evolve it? So those would just be my only cautionary watchouts is don't try to automate workflows that maybe weren't right to begin with, and then how do you approach the different dynamics of products in the best way possible and only kind of makes consistency where is needed at the enterprise level.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. You touched on two things. I wanted just to play back, right?
Yeah,
One is just automating something broken. You make it broken things more and then more distributed and used, right? So that's the main thing that we've seen that a lot, right? A lot of times the people using this opportunity to see what's working, what's broken, how do we
Mhm.
change it work? That's why it's called a transformation, not just automate something, that's it, right? That's
Right.
broken things to be more broken and more widely used. The second part of that is, and that's something I always propose, is product ops managing a product. That's how company operate. So the
Right.
taste and the experience of how companies should operate at different teams, different maturity level, different product evolve is extremely important so that you touch on both of them. I think it's an excellent point for company to realize that it's not like you bring some external consultant, say, how do you guys do things today? I'm just automated. No,
Right.
that is not how it works, right? Just like you don't hear customer feedback and I just build it. Clearly,
Right.
not what you're gonna do. Same thing, how you run a company is a product, right? The
Yeah.
operations itself. And then the part you really mentioned is like having the taste and the understanding how we operate different stages and then being able to continuously adjust, just like another product, right?
Right.
So this is amazing. Thank you so much, Kelly. I
Yeah, of
really
course.
appreciate, very much enjoy the conversation. And if we have any
Likewise.
questions, I'll follow up with you as well. Do you want to add any more things before we wrap up?
No, this was awesome. Thank you for the discussion.
Yeah, it's awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Be in touch. Take care.
Take care.